Blueprints. They're pretty cool, but oftentimes if you're just starting out in Unreal, you might be wondering to yourself, why should I learn blueprints if I don't plan on making any games? Well, you should learn blueprints because we can create tools for use within the Unreal Engine editor itself with blueprints. And these tools can drastically increase our workflow and just generally make Unreal a lot easier to use so we can focus on the art. At the beginning of this tutorial, we will create a blueprint that will automatically make material instances. And at the end of this tutorial, we will create an array tool for spawning multiple objects in a row. So with all that being said, let's jump into it. To help demonstrate blueprints, I created some free furniture assets you can download, link in the description below. Once you have the project downloaded and open, it should bring you to this very basic orange room. Now, if you want to know how to light a room like this, I go over that within my Unreal Engine beginner tutorial series, so go check that out. If we go through each of these objects, we'll see that they have a material instance on them with a color parameter. So in all these objects, we can quickly change what the primary color of that object is. And some of them have even more advanced materials, like this rotary phone. If I see the material instance here, not only can we control the color of this phone, but we can also control the dirt opacity, how strong that dirt is, and whether or not the dial here is gold or not. So you can see really rapidly, we can get a completely different scene just by changing those material instances. So let's go through the process of creating a new room with a new primary color. First, I'm going to go duplicate room_orange, and let's make this room_red. So if I double click on this, save selected, all my lighting is gone, so I'm just going to build it real quickly. Now that lighting is built, I'm going to press G to get rid of this clutter, go down here and create a new material. So what I will do is I will find where that material is by clicking on the magnifying glass. And now I see mi_orange square chair, and I want to find its parent. So I'm going to double click on this material, click on the magnifying glass under parent, and now I know where that parent is. So to create a new material instance, I'm going to right click it, create material instance, and I'm just going to call this red and change it from M to MI. Now I'm going to go override that material by dragging it onto my chair, double clicking on my new material. I'm going to go to color, activate it, and change this to red. Let's make it deeper red, like that. Honestly, for this case, that process was fine, but I have to go through each of these objects and do the same thing. And what if I have 100 different objects and I want each object to have its own unique color or its own unique dirt amount? Then I would have to go through the same process for all of them, and this would take up a lot of time and also take up a lot of clutter within our content browser. And this is where blueprints can come in handy. So let's turn this chair into a blueprint. What I will do first is press Ctrl and B to find where that chair is within my content browser. And now that I know where it is, I'm going to right click on that static mesh, come up to Asset Actions, and then do Create Blueprint using this. And I'm going to call this BP, stands for blueprint_square chair, and it's going to create a blueprint file for me. I'm going to hit OK. And now if I dock this up here, we can see we have a neat little blueprint, and we also have a static mesh to go along with it. Let's go over some blueprint viewport controls you may not know. If you hold down Alt and left mouse button, you can rotate around the object. And if you hold down L and the right mouse button, we can rotate this sun around our object and see it from different angles. So your immediate reaction might be to go to Event Graph and then start writing your logic here. But that's wrong, since Event Graph will only run while the game is running. We actually want to go to Construction Script, which will shoot out an event every time that object is activated within the editor. So if you're ever wondering what this little function was right here, this just activates within the editor, and this is what we're going to use throughout the tutorial. First, we want to create a dynamic material and assign it to this static mesh. To do that, in Construction Script, I'm going to left click, drag out, let go, and I'm going to type in create dynamic material instance, and make sure you select the one that has static mesh. And now under source material, I'm going to select the drop down and find where M underscore square chair is. So what is happening right now is that it is creating a dynamic material of M underscore square chair, so an instance of that material, and assigning it to my static mesh, which is in this case, my chair right here. So now what I would like to do is set the color of this dynamic material instance that we just created. And to do so, I'm going to drag off, this is very important, drag off from the blue pin here, because this blue pin is returning a material instance. And then I'm going to go set vector parameter. And what this is doing is that it's going to go through and set a color to the parameter name with none. And we don't want that. We want the name to be color. That's because if I actually go into this material instance, we can see that the parameter we want to change is called color. And you want to make sure the names match up exactly, or else this will not work. So now with that being said, I'm going to compile, click on browse to jump to where this blueprint is located, and now I'm going to drag it in. And we are getting a black chair because if we go back to our blueprint, we can see the value right now is selected black. I could change this to dark bluish, hit compile, and now my chair is dark bluish. Okay, so this is kind of defeating the purpose of what we want, since what we wanted to be able to change the color individually on each instance of this blueprint. And right now, all the blueprints will still have the same color. And we can achieve that through variables. And variables, long story short, they're basically containers that contain data. And we can create a variable and make that editable within the details panel right here. So to do so, I'm going to right click on the variable I want and then go to promote to variable. So it's going to automatically ask me what I want to name this. I want to name this color. Now if I compile, go to room red, we'll see that we don't get any color value right here. And that's because I need to tell Unreal, hey, this color value should be editable within the Unreal editor. And I could do that by clicking on the eye icon right next to the variable. Or I could come up here and click on instance editable and set that to true. Now if I compile, go to room underscore red, we can see that we have a color parameter. And if I click on it, I can change this in the editor. Now I can hold down Alt and, well actually first I'm going to go drag this up in the air, click on End to snap it to the ground. And now if I hold down Alt and drag out a bunch of different copies of chairs, I can go through each one and give them their own unique values. All the colors of the rainbow, and I can achieve this without having to create any material instances, creating more clutter, or just taking up a lot of time. So now if I have 100 different chair objects, I don't have to create 100 different material instances. I can just go through and change each one individually within the details panel of my editor. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go over exactly what happened with the blueprints. So if I go into my blueprints, we can see the first thing I did was create a material instance of M underscore square chair and assign that to my static mesh. And then within that material instance, I changed the vector parameter called color with a variable called color, and this color is instance editable. And I can tell it's instance editable by this little eye icon right here. And it's also important to know that I can change what the color is by default. Right now by default it's this blue. I'm just going to make this whitish. Hit OK. Compile. Go back here. So now whenever I drag in this blueprint, by default the chair will be white. Okay, now that we got the chair out of the way, let's do a little bit more complicated material with the rotary phone. So it won't just be 2 simple nodes. There'll be a couple more nodes and a little bit of a trick that you'll see. To start off, it's going to be the exact same as what we did with the chair. So I'm going to fly over to the rotary phone, select it, hit Control B to find where it is in the content browser, right click, go to Asset Actions, create blueprint using this, and call this BP underscore rotary phone, and hit OK. Now I'm just going to compile right now and save. And then go into construction script, drag out a new node, and just do the create dynamic material instance on the static mesh. Organize. And let's do m underscore phone. No, it's m underscore rotary phone. And this guy's going to be a little bit tricky because if I go to the material instance, we can see that it has not just color, but it has a bunch more vector parameters. So let's start off with the easy ones we know how to do, which is the colors, the vectors, and the scalar values, and then we'll move on to this Boolean value. So exit out of here. I will go to rotary phone, drag out from here, and let's do set vector parameter value with color. Drag out from here again, go set vector parameter value. This one will be dirt color. Let me double check that that's what it's called. Yep, it is called dirt color. And then I'm going to go right click on both of these, promote to variable, color. Right click, dirt color. And make both of these instances editable by indicating them with the eye icons. So let me just organize this a bit more and make sure the graphs are connected with the node. And I'm going to set the default value of this one. First I have to compile to be able to set the default value to white, and the default value of this one to dark brown. Now I will set the scalar value, so basically dirt opacity and dirt power. So going back here, I'm going to drag off and go to set scalar parameter value. Control W, because I know I'm going to want that twice, and hook up the return values so that this node actually knows what material instance to be changing these values on. Hook them up like this. And this looks really messy right now. Don't worry, I will show you a way to fix them in a moment. But for this parameter, I'm going to call this dirt opacity. And for this one, dirt power. Right click, promote to variable. I'm going to call this dirt opacity. Right click, promote to variable. I'm going to call this dirt power. And these variables, whenever they're green, they are floats. Floats are basically numbers with decimals. So like 2.3, 3.999, all that stuff. So make each of these instances editable. And instead of clicking on the eye icon, remember, if I just click on the variable, I can come up here and check that to true. And hit compile. And for defaults, I want dirt power to be 1 and dirt opacity to be 0 with a slider range from 0 to 1, since I don't imagine a reason why someone will want to go negative values or above 1. And then I'm going to hit compile, save, and let's actually go back into the level now and replace this static mesh with our blueprint. So drag this in. Oop, make it go up, hit N to snap it to the table. Rotate this. Try to get it into position. I'm actually going to turn off snapping for now. And get it there. Okay, so if you have built lighting in like the past couple of minutes, you may have noticed one glaring issue. And that is, first let me build lighting. Our objects are not being calculated within the light bake or within the light mass. And I can tell this because if I go over here with this phone, and if I hit H, it's not leaving behind any shadows. So I'm going to do Control H to unhide that. And if I go Alt and 0 to go into my light map view, I can see these objects are dark gray. So that also tells me, actually dark green. So that also tells me that these objects are set to movable and not set to static. And we can fix that by going into the object's blueprints. Viewport, selecting that object, or I can select it from the Components tab, and changing mobility to static. Same with rotary phone, select static mesh, and hit static. Compile both of these. And now in Alt 0, I can see that they have light map resolution ready. So if I build now they're actually being included within the light mass bake. So if I come over here, click on the phone, hit H, we can see a nice shadow being developed there. I'm going to hit Control H, then we're going to Alt 0 to see my light resolution. And let's say I want this object to have a higher resolution than this one. Don't worry, we can still override our static mesh light map resolutions by clicking on this one. And within this components panel, I can hit static mesh right here. Go down to overridden light map res and change this to 256. So now if I click away from that, we can see this one has a higher resolution than that one. So there are no downsides to using blueprints. So I'm going to go back out of that, go to lit, and now let's start editing my phone blueprint again. Go back into the blueprint, and this looks gross. Let's do some organizing right now. And remember, these blue wires that are crisscrossing and are pretty much the main reason why our blueprint looks bad are actually references to the material instance. So instead of having to drag this out and try to go all the way down to a node, I can promote this to a variable and use the variable to connect all these nodes together. So I'm going to hold down Alt and break the connections. And I'm going to right click on this, go to promote to variable, and I'm going to call this material instance ref. And ref stands for reference. So now if I move this, connect it up like here, what is happening is that when this node runs, it's going to create a material instance, and this material instance will be stored within this variable. And it is this variable that I can drag out and hover over the blue inputs, let go, that will actually be the ones telling these nodes what vectors, what parameters they should be changing. So now I can make them look like nice and horizontal. Go through each one, drag material instance ref, material instance ref, material instance ref, and if I zoom out, this is looking a lot nicer than before. Let's double check our phone. So let's go to level, and within here, you can see we have color. Color is working. Dirt color. Can't tell because it's set to 0 right now. Let's go bring up the opacity to 1. So now if I change this, yeah, I can see dirt color is working. And let's go check out the dirt power. Let's bring this down a bit, increase the contrast. Yeah, dirt power is looking, and this looks gross. But we are missing one parameter, and that is if I go into, we can see it is gold. So I don't have any Boolean right here to change whether or not this is gold. So I'm going to go back into my rotary phone. Let me go grab this and go get material instance ref, drag off of this, and let's go set Boolean. And there is no set Boolean parameter value. So how are we going to fix this? Well, let's actually go into rotary phone material. So if I go to mi_orange rotary phone, double click on to see the parent, and then I'll get the material. It's actually, yeah, it's pretty basic, but right here where it says is gold switch parameter, I'm going to change that from a switch parameter to a scalar parameter. And this scalar parameter will just be on a scale either 0 or 1 and nothing in between. To do that, I'm going to delete this parameter, hold down L, left click to bring in a lerp, drag this node into B, drag the bottom here right into A, and then drag this one out into alpha right there. Hold down 1, left click. Let's go convert the parameter. Let's call this is gold question mark. And now connect this up into alpha. Don't forget to hit apply. And back in my blueprint, I'll drag this out and go set scalar parameter. Drag this there, and I'm going to call this is gold, because if we go into our material instance now, we'll see that is gold is a scalar parameter, and it's right now set to 0. But here's the thing, instead of right clicking and going promote to variable, I want a Boolean, because that's still easier since I know it's either 1 or 0. So I'm going to go to variables, click on new variable, and call this is gold question mark. And I'll drag this in as a get, and make sure it is instance editable, so make the eye icon noticeable. But now you might be wondering, how am I going to put a Boolean into a float? Well, in computers, Booleans aren't actually true or false. Instead, they are either 0 for false or 1 for true. So knowing that knowledge, I can drag isGold into my scalar value and hit apply. So now if isGold is false, it is 0. So then a 0 will be shot into it. Or if it is 1, then it is true. So if I go into my level, zoom out a bit, go down here, we see that there is gold and that's a Boolean. And if I check this, it turns to gold. And if I uncheck it, it loses its gold. Now, that concludes the blueprint material instancing part of this tutorial. I highly encourage you to go over the other furniture, like the table and the clock, and turn those into blueprints using the same process we just did. I'm not going to go over that since that's just redundant. And with that being said, let's jump into creating an array tool. Okay, this room is really messy, so I'm going to go to a new room by going to Architecture Assets, Maps, and let's do the blue room. Okay, now that we're in the blue room, let's create our array tool. So go to Blueprints, right-click, Blueprint Class, Actor. I'm going to call this BP underscore array tool. First things first, I want to add the ability to be able to change the static mesh of this BP underscore array tool within the details panel. And I'll do that through, of course, instance editable variables. So I'm going to double click on BP underscore array tool, drag out of here, and first I want to add a static mesh component. And what this will do, just add a static mesh component without a static mesh. So I want to specify what static mesh we will use. So I'm going to go drag it out, I'm going to go set static mesh. And again, instead of choosing the static mesh here, I'm going to right click and make this instance editable variable. So promote to local variable and then call this static mesh and make this instance editable. So now if I compile, drag out a BP underscore array tool, you notice we have no static mesh because we haven't selected it yet. And I think I'll just use this chair for now as a demo. So right click on chair, Control B to find where that chair is, go back to array tool and drag my chair into our variable slot. And now we have a nice chair that was spawned in. Okay, so now I want to add a variable that will tell the blueprint the amount of times I want this chair to be duplicated. So I'm going to go back to my blueprint, hit variable, and I'm going to call this array amount. And I will make this an integer. And if you don't know what an integer is basically a number with no decimal. So 1, 2, 3, -4, all of that. And what I will use is a for loop. Right click, type in for loop. And drag this into that and drag array amount into last index. And I'm going to set the first index to 2. So if you ever coded or programmed before, you'll see for loop. You'll be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. But if you haven't, and this is a really dirty explanation, basically the loop body execution pin will run whenever the last index is greater than or equal to the first index. And whenever the loop body execution pin is done running, it will add 1 to the first index. So for example, if my array amount is, let me compile this and set this to 2. So if my array amount is 2, then Unreal will check the last index greater than or equal to the first index, which in my case is 2 is greater than or equal to 2, and then it will say yes it is. So then the loop body will shoot out, everything will be executed here, and then it will go back to the for loop and add 1 to the first index. Now it's going to check whether or not 2 is greater than or equal to 3. And then Unreal is going to say, oh, it's not, 2 can't be greater than or equal to 3. So then it will run the completed execution pin down here and ignore the loop body pin. So we would only see all the logic coming from this pin ran once if array amount was 2. If it was 3, we would see everything from the loop body ran 2 times. If it's 4, we would see everything from loop body run 3 times, and so on. And we could double check this by adding in a print string and say all caps loop body pin exec. And I'm going to set the duration to 4 seconds. So if I go to array mounts and set this to 1, we should see this print string never run. So I'm going to hit compile, save, go back here, and we don't see any print string. Now, if I set this to, oh, my bad, go back to array tool and make sure array amount, the eye icon is selected to true. Hit compile. Now I can see it in there. So now if I set this to 2, I should see it run once. And it does run once. If I set this to 3, it'll be twice. 4, 3 times. 5, 4 times. And so on. Let's add the logic to the for loop. So going back here, I want a new static mesh to spawn each time this loop body is activated. So I'm just going to go here, Control C, come over here, Control V, and add that in like that. So now if we hit compile, save, we see nothing happen, and the array amount is set to 5. So we want to see 5 static meshes here. Well, we actually are seeing 5 static meshes. It's just that they're all overlapping each other, so we can't tell. What we need to do is offset each static mesh when they spawn. So have an offset variable, let's say 2 meters, so then every 2 meters, a new static mesh will spawn. So let's make a variable available. So I'm going to go BP_array tool, click the plus icon, add a new variable. I'm going to call this one offset amount. And if it's not float by default, make sure you can select float here. I'm going to hit compile. That's how the offset amount is 0 by default. And make sure it's instance editable. Now I'm going to drag this into here. And I want, let's do the x-axis first. I want my static mesh component to spawn in the x-axis within this offset amount. And I can't just drag it into here because we'll see that there's something called relative transform. So I want to split this. That's how I can edit each individual axis. So I'm going to right click this and click on split struct spin. Now we're going to do another split because we can see that X, Y, and Z are stuck in a vector. So I'm going to right click this and then go to split struct spin again. And now I have access to edit all of these axis variables. And I'm going to drag offset amount into X. So now if I hit compile, save, go back into my world, I'm going to make the offset amount 1 meter, so 200 Unreal units. Since if you don't know, Unreal units are centimeters. So 200 centimeters would be 2 meters. Then hit enter. And now we can see our chair spawn 2 meters, but again, there's a problem, and that is we don't see any more chairs spawning. So essentially what we did was that we just told Unreal, spawn the first one right here within the array locations origin, and then spawn everything else. So there's 4 chairs right now overlapping 2 meters to the right of it. And I don't want that. I want it, that's how on each loop, we'll add 2 meters. So that's how the next one will be 2 meters away from the previous one, and the next one, and so on. So I'm going to go BP_array tool and add in a new float variable, and I'm going to call this current amount. Now I'm going to drag this into my world and go to set current amount. Here's a shortcut. If you hold down Alt while you drag, they'll automatically put it into set. And then if you hold down Control when you drag, they'll automatically put into get. So you can delete those. And now I want the offset amount to be added onto the current amount. So go to plus float, drag current amount into the plus, drag this pin out into current amount, have this set like that, and drag the new output of current amount into relative transform location X. And now if I hit compile, go back into here, and I fly out, we can see, oh look, we now have 5 chairs, and each of them are separated by 2 meters. What is happening right now is that current amount is set to 0 by default. So this is 0. The first time we run loop body, it's going to add the offset amount to current amount and set that as the current amount. So now the current amount is just the offset amount, and make that the transformation X. Now the next time it runs this loop body, it's going to add another offset amount, so twice the original times, into current amount and make that location X. And then the next one would be 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and so forth. Let's play around with array and see if everything's working. If we go to room_blue, I can drag this to the left right here and maybe decrease it to just 2. Then I can play around with the offset amount. So I can make this just 1 meter. then slowly increase the array amount. We can go a lot to very little. And right now it looks like the array is working. So now I want to implement this logic, but on each axis, because right now we're only editing or duplicating within the x-axis. So I will slightly speed up this part since it's literally just me renaming these variables and duplicating them for the y and z. Okay, so I finished, but it's looking kind of messy since we have some crisscrossing wires. Now, sometimes there's no way to get rid of crisscrossing wires, but in this case, what I can do is just double click to add a reroute node. And this gives you the ability of just fine tuning where those wires go. So, I don't know. In my opinion, this looks nicer, but you could have kept it the way it was beforehand. Let's test our array to see if everything is working. I'm going to go back to room_blue and move my old array bit to the back. I'm going to hold down Alt to make a new array. And let's make this an array of clocks. So Control B, find that clock, click the new array, drag it in, and let's make this 50 meters apart. And if I go up and down, I can see the clocks decreasing and increasing. We make this go really far, 36. So all the way off into distance right now. And I can also change it and make it diagonal. So I can do a Y offset and a Z offset. So that's pretty neat, but there is one issue, and that is Alt-0. Our objects are movable right now, so it won't get any baked lighting, and we can fix that by going into BP_array tool, clicking on Add Static Mesh Component, switching that to static. Do the other one right here, set that to static, and if I hit compile, it is still movable. That's because in BP_array tool, I should go default scene root and change that from movable to static. And now if I compile, we get our light maps. And one reason why I added the ability to go diagonal or up and down is because we can create dynamic stairs this way. So if I grab out this array, drag it outside, I'm going to go decrease the exposure right now. And if I switch this from that to a, let's do cube, Control B, find where it is within the engine contents, click on the array again, replace that out with a cube. Let's stop with the Y. And we can see some Z fighting right now. Z fighting is when two planes are overlapping and the render engine doesn't know which plane to render. So we can see that right now. And to get rid of that, I'm going to do 100. And now I can have stairs. So if I decrease this like that, make this a little bit smaller, I can increase the amount of steps of the stair. What's great about BP_array tool is that it's very flexible and can be used in several different projects. So instead of having to open up this project all the time, right-clicking and then going to migrate, I can literally just right-click, go to Show and Explore, and this will bring up where this asset is located within my computer. And I can Control-C, Control-V this onto my desktop space. So now if I close this project and open up the landscape project we made within the beginner tutorial, I can literally go into Content, select this BP_array tool, and just copy and paste it back into the content. So now if I go in here, I can see, if I go to Content, that my array tool is located here. Let's go open up the creek. And now, if I come over here, I could go into the array tool, bring it in, maybe select this jar here, so Control B, go back to this, drag this in. Let's make this 10 jars in a row with an X offset. Okay, so really quickly, without even using the migration tool, I was able to get BP_array tool into this project. And that is something I do. Whenever I start a new project, I have a collection of independent.u assets that I just quickly copy and paste into that project without having to go through the hassle of migration. Now, this concludes the tutorial. I hope if you're an artist, you got something out of it, and you know now just how powerful blueprints can be within Unreal Engine for the editor itself. And with all that being said, you can check out the different videos to the sides of me if you want to learn more, and farewell.